Hey y'all, it's KimBoo. Welcome back to episode 2 of Unstoppable Storytelling, the podcast for Serial Nation. We're continuing with the theme of the Renaissance is real, and I want to dig into that a little bit more with you and talk a little bit about what does it mean to be living in the Renaissance or a Renaissance. I suppose there's more than one if you want to think about it that way. But let's ask the real question. How do I know it's a Renaissance? And is it worth your time? Of course, I think it is. I mean, okay, you can stop watching now. That's the answer. Yes, it's worth your time. Do the thing. Write some serials, get some serialization out there. But the answer is a little bit more complicated than that. One thing I think it's really important to note is that not nobody, but most people don't realize they're in a Renaissance. We're in the middle of the Renaissance. And while it's easy to go back to the Renaissance of Europe, I would rather go back to the Renaissance of the internet. And that's a debatable word, like time span, but I was messing with the computers from the 80s through the 90s, finally got online, got my first website when I was 96, I think. And I have to check that date. Anyway, for a while now, I was part of the .com bubble. I was also part of the .com bust, but we won't go into that right now. At the time, many of us understood that the world was changing in profound ways. I mean, if you'd asked me, is this a Renaissance time? I probably would have said yes, but I can't say that I was saying that from a position of authority. It was just the vibe, right? Like 90s were the vibe. We were all about the vibes. I'm Gen X. I'm vibing. But I kind of knew that, and I kind of understood that the world was changing in a way that there was no coming back from, in a way that would have profound impact on everybody's lives. I remember when Monster, the job board of the 90s, first came online, and everyone was like, "Oh, new way to hunt for jobs. This will be more efficient." And now we've got LinkedIn. It's not been a clean and easy process, but did it change everything? Absolutely. Those of us who were job hunting before Monster, before the internet, know how different it is. And we can tell stories about it, but it's kind of like my father telling me, what it was like to grow up during the Depression, a real time and real experiences on his part. But I could only imagine it. And I think that's true for a lot of people, even some people who lived through it. Maybe they weren't in the internet bubble and they were just kind of on the fringes. They saw AOL or they belonged to AOL. They didn't really understand what was going on. It was a Renaissance. I'm pretty confident in that. And it's, most people relate Renaissance with art, and that's valid. But I would argue that there was a humongous uptick in art, as well as Photoshop and PageMaker, all this PageMaker, and eventually all the different desktop publishing software programs came in. A lot of people got into doing art, doing photography, doing digital art, doing things in ways that nobody had ever thought of before because of the new medium. So while obviously I'm not an expert in this kind of historical reframing, I should say, of what a Renaissance is, the fact remains that even at the time where I thought, wow, everything's changing, I didn't really think of it in the way of a Renaissance. That was not as true when self-publishing happened in 2010, ish. Like there's ups and downs along those ways. Kindle came out in 2008. A lot of people mark 2010 as the start because of just the momentum that happened in that time span. But enough of that. We all knew, authors, those of us who were willing to look ahead, we all knew that it was changing dramatically and things would never go back to being the same. And it reminded me of the early years of the internet. I was like, oh yeah, this feeling is familiar. I know this feeling. And you know what? I was right. And so I was all in on the self-publishing. I didn't really leverage it as best as I could have, certainly not as well as some of my colleagues did, but I was at the forefront of it. I was hand coding my first ebook, which has been binned to the depths of the trash, so you will never see that book ever good because it was terribly done, both in writing and in coding. But that's where we were at. We were hand coding our ebooks to get them on Amazon. So much has changed. And at the time, there were many, many people who refused to see it. Many traditional authors who were like, no, it's just another form of vanity publishing. It's going to end up and result in a tsunami of crap. And it's just, there's going to be without any gatekeeping, there's just going to be trash all over the internet, and ebooks aren't real books, and audiobooks aren't real books, is one we've heard lately. So it's just the same song, second, third, fourth, 20th verse. And surprisingly, this isn't a video about AI. I'm talking about serialization. Because when I got into serialization through LiveJournal, I remember, so this was when I was in library school. So it was like between 2010 and 2012 when I was really I was like my most maximum investment in fandom in those years. I was writing fan fiction like a mad woman. I remember telling people, this is the future. This is the future. Posting chapters on a platform. Back then it was LiveJournal. And then, some of us moved to Tumblr, and then AO3 was in the process of becoming the juggernaut that it is today. And I said, this is how it's going to be. This is going to be something big. And everybody just kind of laughed at me. They were like, nah, this is just for fan fiction. Real readers aren't ever going to read serialized work. And perhaps they weren't sneering as much as I just portrayed there, but they really believed that because it was so new, it was so unfathomable to them that people would read regular fiction, original fiction that wasn't fan fiction, in a serialized format. And it is just like, but I knew it was coming. And especially, of course, we had Andy Weir, and they were like, oh, he's an outlier. And then we had The Wandering Inn, and oh, it's another outlier. And then we just had a lot of outliers. Wattpad hit, and things were changing. Oh, that's just romance. That's just for kids. Nobody's reading that. And now we've got Royal Road, and Inkit, and Ream, and Substack, which was never designed. I've made this argument plenty of times. Substack was never designed for long form reading. It just, and by long form, I mean multi-chaptered reading. Like, it just was not that. It was originally a newsletter platform. Now they're trying to kind of make it a social media website hosting platform. It's not for chaptered reading. They might change that down the road. Who knows? But point being, things started to change. So I talk about this in my book, Become an Unstoppable Storyteller, available on my website and also, on my web shop and also on all the major platforms. If you haven't read it yet, go check it out, as they say. That I saw what was happening in the Asian platforms. And by the Asian platforms, I mean specifically China, but also Japan and Taiwan and South Korea. These web novels, as they were called, were huge business, especially in China. One of my favorite shows of all time. Maybe you've heard me talk about it. Ye Cheng Su, They're on Fire. Soon I'm just going to point and y'all are going to know exactly what I mean. But it was based on a web novel that was incredibly popular. Now remember, Nirvana on Fire came out. It's a 50-episode series. It came out in 2015. The book came out earlier than that. So that tells you how much of a head start China and the other Asian platforms had in web novels and web serialization. They were adapted very quickly by readers. Now we're starting to see that same adaptation happening here in the West. I'm in the United States, that's definitely the perspective and the viewpoint that I have. I can't speak for the global South or Africa or Russia. I don't know. Does Russia have serialization platform? Well, they have LiveJournal. Maybe they do. It's like, oh, how things change. Okay, point being, The Renaissance is happening for serialization. We're in it right now. And whether you're like me or some other people who are seeing the writing on the wall, who've been studying publishing for 30, 40 years, who've seen all these upheavals happen over time, and we're going, oh yeah, this one's going to be a big one. If you feel that way or you don't, trust me, it's the truth. I am going to write a post on this eventually, so I don't have the numbers up here in front of me right now for this podcast, but I will write a post about the exponential, not quite, no, that's hyperbole, but the amazing growth that online serialization and online reading platforms is going to experience. It is projected to be a very high adoption rate over the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to be a multi-billion-dollar industry here in the West, the same way it is over in China and Japan. It's going to be massive. And it may not feel that way when you're on Substack looking at all the authors who are publishing stuff, and you're on Ream or you're on Wattpad and you're just, or on Royal Road, which is just, whoo, so busy and so many authors and so many stories. And you're thinking, it's too late. It's already saturated. Honey, it is far from saturated. This is like self-publishing in 2012. I swear to you it is. It felt saturated back then, like Amazon felt saturated, if you can even believe it. We were talking about Amazon being saturated as late as 2015. Like, oh no, 2015, Amazon will be saturated. No one will be able to make money anymore. Readers are out there and they're looking for the work. So the Renaissance is real and we're living in it right now. So the question comes to, how can you participate in it? How can you leverage this? How can you make this Renaissance your own personal Renaissance? And I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but you just got to do it. Yeah, I know. I kind of hate that too. Like, yeah, you want to get stronger, you have to lift weights. Oh, I don't want to do that. I got to do that. You got to publish stuff. You got to publish stuff. You got to write stuff and you got to publish stuff. So I was actually talking about this on a recent live stream where I was saying that, because of the money of the invested into the publishing industry, historically speaking, printing a book was a very expensive endeavor. So, and there were no take backsies. Like if you made a typo on page somewhat like page 42 or something, you can just go scoop up all those books, quickly reprint them and send them back out. So editing and proofreading were really big and important aspects of publishing itself. There was just no avoiding it. The money was on the table. The product had to be as perfect as possible. That is not so much true with serialization. And this is not an argument to put out subpar work, but I think it is an argument to put out good enough work. Recently, I just started, pulled out of hiatus, I should say, my serial Transmigrated Terry. It's a portal fantasy. It's on my Biblioteca blog site on Substack, and it's about a middle-aged Gen X woman, my people. She's had a different life than me, though, and who gets transmigrated into a fantasy book series that she's a big fan of. And the fantasy book series is also made up by me, so it's not based on any real fantasy book series. It's kind of based on the idea of those 1990s epic fantasy, chosen one novels. She gets woken up in that world. I wrote maybe 20,000 words, give or take, and I was like, oh, it's good enough. I'm going to start publishing it. It was a mistake. Didn't listen to a little nagging concern I had about that one big massive plot hole that was ahead of me, because I am a discovery writer. And oh yeah, I wrote a book about that too. Hey, check it out. Look at this. KimBoo writing all the books. By the Seat of Your Pants, Secrets of Discovery Writing. So if you feel like you're a pantser and you think that's a bad thing, check out that book. I am a pantser. I am a discovery writer, but I do have some limits. Like I say, I need to write into the story about 30,000 words, give or take, before I really know what's going to happen. I've learned that the hard way. And this was one of those times where I already knew it and I didn't even follow my own advice. So I started posting some chapters of Transmigrated Terry, and then I ran headlong into that plot hole, and the story went on hiatus for nearly a year. I had to go back when I started publishing it again, after I finished it and got out of the plot hole and started figuring out what I needed to do next. I went back to those early chapters and I changed a few things. I fixed a few typos, corrected a few things that were wrong, and then actually changed a few things that were important to the plot later on. Now, anybody who read those chapters a year ago is not going to go back there and pick those apart. They're not going to know. At the time that I posted them, they were good enough. I made a mistake because I posted them too early myself, but the writing, it wasn't bad. It wasn't terrible. I did have to go back and correct them for a few things for focusing on the plot and the outline. What I'm getting at here is that the rules have changed. You can make mistakes. You can go back and fix something that isn't right. You can, what is called, draft in public. A lot of romance authors on Ream and on Wattpad state that very clearly. They're like, these are draft chapters. I'm still working on the story. I haven't finished it yet, or it's in edits. If you catch anything, let me know. And once it's completed here, then I'll pull it down, make final edits on it, and then I'll make it available in Kindle Unlimited. That is a very common practice these days. And it kind of goes back to the post that I made not too long ago on my scriptorium blog called Make More Pots. It really is a foundational belief of mine, and it leans into my theory of write 1 million words. I actually need to revive my Discord for the 1 million words club, which is all about just write, just do the thing and write. And the point of Make More Pots is based on that study where 2 groups of students were given the assignment to make pots. Most creatives are very familiar with this, so I won't belabor it. Anyway, the group that made more pots were just graded on the weight of the amount of clay that they used rather than the perfection of the final pot. It made better pots. They got experience, they learned what worked, they learned what didn't work, they learned what they liked, they learned what matched their vision, how to reach that, because they were just doing it over and over and over. And that's very true for writing. And in serialization, unfortunately, gotta tell you, that's what it's gonna take. If you don't have a lot of work to work from, you might have to decide to start with drafting in public. And that's terrifying for a lot of people because they're scared to death. They're going to put something out there that is not perfect and they'll get slammed for it. And let me tell you, yeah, you probably will. Even people who love your writing, they're going to come into the comments and they're going to say, this isn't hitting. What you thinking? Why'd you do this? But if they're your people, they're coming at you from a place of love and support. If you do have more than one story going on, though, I suggest maybe take one that is not as close to your heart as your main series. Maybe start with a short story or 2 and start publishing those. The reason that I think this is so important is because you need to get used to the idea of putting your work out there for people to read, not just for editors to edit, and to engage with your readers, and more importantly, engage with yourself in the process of putting a serial out. Now, if you're a plotter who likes to outline and who likes to have the whole story finished before you do anything with it, that's okay too. I'm not saying go against your natural inclinations. What I am saying is maybe as soon as you finish the story, start posting the first chapter before you've gone back and done all the edits. Push yourself past your limits. I think that's very important, and that is such an underrated element of every Renaissance. No Renaissance happened because everybody was playing within the rules, within the grid, within the lines. They were drawing and crawling outside the lines. They were doing wild and crazy things. They were making people mad. Let me tell you, you're going to make people mad. When we started self-publishing, we being collective self-publishers, indie publishers, started self-publishing, man, we lost friends. I had author friends who I'd known for years at that point who just basically would not have anything to do with me because I was such a stain on the industry and I might pollute their reputation. They were associating with self-published authors. You know, they eventually came around. You don't find too many people saying that these days, but yes, there was a lot of pushback, and so we had to push out and live into the moment. Being in the Renaissance can be scary. I didn't say it was going to be safe and easy, but you are in it now, and if you jump into it with both hands and your mind and all your stories, you are going to have a great experience. Because I call myself a serial evangelist. That kind of sounds serial killer. Serialization evangelist, probably better. And that's because I love it. I love writing serials. I love sharing serials. I love reading serialized stories. It's so much fun. And I encourage everybody to get on that boat. So, as we live in the middle of this Renaissance, the question I want you to ask is not, is serialization worth it? Is it worth my time? Is it just a trend? Is it a fad? Is it really a Renaissance? My question to you is, do you have stories you want to tell that you want to share? Yeah? All right, so do I. Let's do it. It's our time. Let's serialize a little bit. Let's get the stories out there. Let's put in some cliffhangers. Let's make it exciting for people. Let's give them something to enjoy, something to make them think, maybe move their heart a little bit. We're writers. That's what we do. So I encourage you to do that. Historians will get around to defining and slicing and dicing what these seasons and times are. Is it a Renaissance? I'll have, 20 people in the comments telling me I'm being pretentious. Yeah, okay. The point is, now's the time to show up and do the thing. Paint outside the lines. Draft in public. Reach out to your readers. Engage with your stories. Build the community. Man, all that's possible. I hope you do it. I hope this helps you do it. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Click the likey button, subscribey thing. I also have a Patreon where I get more engaged one-on-one with my patrons. So if you're interested in asking specific questions or in engaging in some of the resources I have there, you can buy them. If you just one of the serial maps that I've done, that's easy enough. But if you join, then you can show up for office hours and we have chats. And so we have a lot of things growing. It's still a growing community, but it's getting there. I do have the free Serial Nation Field Notes Substack. So those are posts that are free posts. They usually get posted later along the line after they've been on the Patreon. And of course, I've got this podcast and I'm just doing a lot of stuff, including my own writing, which I kind of sort of need to get to. So thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to talking with you again soon.